My name is Samantha Kelly. I'm 28 years old, and after building a successful real estate career that allows me to earn substantial commissions while helping families find their dream homes, I have spent the last 2 years quietly supporting my unemployed father, Walter, my enabling mother, Lisa, and my college dropout brother, Ryan, all of whom live rent-free in the house that I purchased to save them from foreclosure while constantly criticizing my career choices and dismissing my contributions to their survival. What they didn't know was that their devastating Thanksgiving dinner attack, where Walter snarled, "You're good for nothing here," while Lisa nodded in agreement and Ryan snorted with derision, would be the last time they would ever have the privilege of insulting the person who owned their home, paid their bills, and kept them fed while they contributed absolutely nothing except complaints about my work ethic and lifestyle choices. The real estate career that my family consistently dismissed as not a real job had actually grown from humble beginnings as a newly licensed agent, struggling to build clientele into a thriving practice that generated over $180,000 in annual commissions through dedicated client service, market expertise, and the kind of 7-day work weeks that most people wouldn't tolerate for any amount of money. Samantha helped us find the perfect home for our growing family, my clients would say when referring friends and colleagues to my real estate practice. She understood exactly what we needed, negotiated an excellent price, and guided us through every step of the buying process with patience and professionalism that exceeded all our expectations. The client testimonials that filled my professional portfolio and generated repeat business were evidence of work ethic and expertise that had earned respect throughout the local real estate community, but they were also the foundation for income that had become essential for supporting 3 unemployed adults who viewed my success with resentment rather than pride. "Real estate isn't a real career," Walter would say whenever relatives asked about my professional achievements during family gatherings. "It's just showing houses to people and taking commissions for work that anyone could do with minimal training and effort." The dismissive characterization of real estate as easy money that required minimal skill ignored the reality that successful agents spent years developing market knowledge, building client relationships, and mastering complex legal and financial processes that made home buying and selling possible for families who trusted them with their largest financial transactions. "Samantha is obsessed with money," Lisa would add when discussing my career choices with extended family members. "She works all the time and never has time for family activities because she's always chasing another commission instead of focusing on what really matters in life." The criticism of my work schedule and income focus was both hypocritical and revealing, since the family activities that Lisa wanted me to prioritize were entirely funded by the commissions I earned through working weekends, evenings, and holidays to serve clients who needed professional real estate guidance during their home buying and selling processes. "Samantha thinks she's better than us because she makes money," Ryan would contribute when family discussions turned to career choices and educational priorities. "She acts like having a job makes her superior to people who are still figuring out their life direction and career goals." The resentment about my financial independence while Ryan remained unemployed and dependent on family support was typical of his approach to personal responsibility, consistently blaming others for his lack of achievement while criticizing those who had worked to build successful careers and financial security. But while my family maintained these attitudes about my career and character, they were also completely dependent on the income that my obsession with money generated through serving clients who appreciated my expertise and dedication to helping them navigate complex real estate transactions that would affect their financial security for decades. The family financial crisis that had made my support essential began 2 years ago when Walter lost his manufacturing job during company-wide layoffs that eliminated hundreds of positions and devastated families throughout our community who had depended on stable industrial employment for their economic security and retirement planning. "I can't believe they're shutting down the entire production line after 23 years of loyal service," Walter had said with justified anger about losing employment that had provided steady income and benefits for more than 2 decades of dedicated work and consistent attendance. The job loss that had eliminated Walter's income was both personally devastating and financially catastrophic For a family that had never developed alternative income sources or sufficient savings to weather extended unemployment during an economic downturn that made finding replacement employment extremely difficult for displaced manufacturing workers. "We're facing foreclosure if I can't find another job in the next 3 months," Walter had told me during one of his panicked phone calls about their deteriorating financial situation. "The mortgage payments are more than my unemployment benefits, and we can't maintain the house without additional income." The foreclosure threat that would have forced my parents to lose their family home was both emotionally devastating and practically unacceptable, since they had lived in the same house for 15 years and had invested their retirement savings in maintaining and improving the property that represented their primary financial asset. Have you ever been in a position where you had to choose between letting your family lose their home or sacrificing your own financial goals to save them from consequences of circumstances beyond their control? That's exactly what I faced as Walter's unemployment stretched from weeks into months, without any prospects for replacement employment that would provide comparable income and benefits. "I'll buy the house from you," I had told my parents without fully calculating how devastating this decision would be for my own financial planning and career development goals. "You can continue living there, and I'll handle the mortgage payments while Dad looks for new employment opportunities." The decision to purchase my parents' house to prevent foreclosure required me to liquidate most of my savings, take on substantial debt, and commit to monthly mortgage payments that would strain my budget for years, while also eliminating my ability to purchase my own home or invest in business expansion that could have increased my long-term earning potential. "Samantha, we can't ask you to buy our house," Lisa had protested with guilt about accepting such massive financial assistance from her daughter. "That's too much responsibility for someone your age, and it's not fair to expect you to sacrifice your financial future for our housing stability." "Mom, you're not asking me," I had replied with practical focus on solutions rather than fairness or burden distribution. "I'm choosing to help because losing your home would be devastating for the whole family, and I have the income and credit necessary to maintain the mortgage payments." The house purchase that saved my parents from foreclosure was completed through a private sale that allowed them to avoid the public humiliation and credit damage of foreclosure proceedings, but it also committed me to monthly expenses that would require working longer hours and accepting more clients to maintain cash flow and debt service obligations. "Thank you for saving our home," Walter had said with genuine appreciation for my financial sacrifice. "This gives me time to find another job without the pressure of immediate homelessness hanging over our family." But while I was taking on substantial financial obligations to preserve my family's housing stability, Walter's job search efforts were inconsistent and half-hearted, with long periods of inactivity interrupted by brief applications for positions that were either inappropriate for his skills or offered wages significantly below his previous manufacturing salary. "There aren't any good jobs available," Walter would complain when I asked about his employment search progress. "Everything requires different training or pays less than unemployment benefits, so there's no point in accepting positions that wouldn't improve our financial situation." The rationalization for remaining unemployed rather than accepting lower-paying work ignored the reality that any legitimate employment would have reduced the financial burden on me while demonstrating initiative and work ethic that might have led to better opportunities through networking and professional development. "Walter needs time to find the right opportunity," Lisa would add when defending his extended unemployment. "He shouldn't have to take just any job after decades of loyal service to his previous employer. He deserves to find something that matches his experience and expertise." The support for Walter's selective approach to employment, while I worked 7-day weeks to maintain household expenses, was both enabling and unfair, since it prioritized his comfort and preferences over practical solutions that would have reduced family financial dependence on my income and career sacrifice. But the most frustrating aspect of supporting my unemployed family was watching Ryan drop out of college and join the household of non-contributing adults who expected me to fund their lifestyle while they criticized my work ethic and career choices. "College isn't for everyone," Ryan had announced when he decided to abandon his education after 2 years of mediocre academic performance. "I need to explore different options and figure out what I really want to do with my life." The decision to quit college without any alternative career plan or employment prospects was both financially wasteful and practically irresponsible, Since he had accumulated student loan debt without earning a degree that would have qualified him for professional employment opportunities. Ryan is young and still discovering his interests, Lisa had defended when I questioned his decision to abandon education without developing alternative skills or career preparation. Not everyone needs a college degree to be successful, and he shouldn't be pressured into completing a program that doesn't match his learning style. The romantic characterization of dropping out as discovering interests, while I worked to support an additional unemployed adult, was both financially burdensome and personally frustrating, since Ryan showed no initiative toward developing job skills or contributing to household expenses that I was covering entirely through my real estate income. 6 months after Ryan returned home as a college dropout, he had made no progress toward employment, career training, or any form of productive activity that would have contributed to family financial stability or reduced the burden on my earnings and work schedule. "I'm still figuring out my career direction," Ryan would say when relatives asked about his employment plans. "I don't want to rush into something that isn't the right fit just because other people think I should be working." The extended period of figuring out career direction while living rent-free and consuming family resources that I was providing was both practically unsustainable and personally insulting, since he was criticizing my work ethic while benefiting from my financial sacrifice and professional dedication. But while Ryan remained unemployed and Walter's job search continued to be unproductive, I was working longer hours and accepting more challenging clients to generate the income necessary to support 3 adults who contributed nothing except criticism of my priorities and lifestyle choices. The family dynamic that had developed around my financial support was both unhealthy and unsustainable, with unemployed family members establishing their moral superiority over my money obsession, while depending entirely on the money I earned through working weekends, holidays, and extended hours that left me exhausted and socially isolated. "Samantha never spends time with family anymore," Lisa would complain to relatives during gatherings that were funded by my absence from family activities. "She's always working or meeting with clients instead of prioritizing relationships and family connections." The criticism of my work schedule while enjoying the financial benefits of that work was both hypocritical and cruel, since the family time that Lisa valued was only possible because I was working to provide the housing, utilities, food, and other expenses that made family gatherings comfortable and affordable. "Samantha has become selfish and materialistic," Walter would add when discussing my career focus with extended family members. "She cares more about making money than about spending time with people who love her." The characterization of earning money to support unemployed family members as selfishness, while their complete dependence on my income was framed as deserving family support, revealed the twisted logic that had developed around family financial relationships and expectations. The woman who was working 7-day weeks to prevent her family's homelessness, while enduring constant criticism about her priorities and character, was about to face the most devastating family attack of her life, when Thanksgiving dinner would become a forum for unleashing years of resentment about unemployment and dependence on someone they had convinced themselves was inferior to their unemployed moral superiority. The Thanksgiving dinner that would permanently destroy our family relationships began on what should have been a day of gratitude and celebration, but instead became the culmination of 2 years of resentment and criticism directed at the person whose financial sacrifice had made the holiday feast and comfortable family gathering possible in the first place. "Samantha, I'm glad you could take time away from work to join us for Thanksgiving," Lisa said with obvious sarcasm, as I arrived at the house that I owned, but where I was increasingly made to feel like an unwelcome guest rather than the family member who was subsidizing everyone's existence. The passive-aggressive comment about taking time away from work ignored the reality that I had rearranged my schedule and turned down client appointments to be present for family Thanksgiving dinner, sacrificing income and professional opportunities to participate in family traditions that were funded by my absence from similar family gatherings throughout the year. "It's nice that you finally remembered you have a family," Ryan added with the kind of entitled resentment that had characterized his attitude since dropping out of college and joining the household of adults who contributed nothing except complaints about my work ethic and dedication to earning the money that kept them housed and fed. The accusation that I had forgotten about family while working to prevent their homelessness and financial ruin was both factually incorrect and emotionally manipulative, designed to make me feel guilty about career responsibilities that were essential for their survival and comfort. "Samantha is always busy with her little house showing job," Walter said with obvious dismissal of the real estate career that was generating the income necessary to pay the mortgage on the house where we were eating Thanksgiving dinner that I had purchased and prepared using money from my little job. The characterization of professional real estate practice as a little house showing job was both insulting and ignorant about the complexity of real estate transactions, market analysis, client counseling, and legal coordination required to help families make the most important financial decisions of their lives. But while my family minimized my career achievements and criticized my work schedule, they had also planned Thanksgiving dinner to include extended family members who would witness their attack on my character and priorities, creating an audience for the humiliation they were preparing to inflict on the person who was supporting their lifestyle. "Uncle Dave, Samantha is too busy making money to spend time with family," Lisa announced to my father's brother and his wife, who had joined us for the holiday meal that was taking place in my house, prepared with food I had purchased, and served on a table that I was paying for through mortgage payments and utility bills. "That's too bad," Uncle Dave replied with polite sympathy for what he believed was accurate information about my priorities. "Family time is more important than money, especially during holidays when we should be grateful for our blessings and connections with people who love us." The irony of discussing gratitude for blessings while attacking the person who had provided most of those blessings was apparently lost on extended family members who were unaware that the comfortable holiday gathering was entirely funded by the niece they were being taught to pity rather than appreciate. "Samantha doesn't understand family values," Ryan contributed with confidence about moral principles he had never demonstrated through employment, education, or any form of contribution to family stability and financial security. "She thinks money is more important than relationships and spending time with people who care about her." The lecture about family values from someone who had never contributed anything to family financial stability while living rent-free and consuming resources provided by my money obsession was both hypocritical and revealing about the twisted moral framework that had developed in our household. "I work to support this family," I said quietly, trying to defend my career and financial contributions without creating the kind of confrontation that would ruin Thanksgiving dinner for everyone present, including extended family members who were unaware of the financial dynamics that made their comfortable celebration possible. "Support this family?" Walter exploded with sudden rage that had apparently been building throughout the meal. "You don't support anything. You're never here. You don't care about anyone except yourself and your clients, and you act like earning money makes you better than people who understand what family really means. Have you ever been verbally attacked by someone whose survival depended entirely on your financial support, while other family members nodded in agreement with criticism that was completely opposite to reality?" That's exactly what I was experiencing as Walter unleashed years of resentment about his unemployment on the person who had prevented his homelessness. "You're good for nothing here," Walter continued with escalating anger that was both personally devastating and completely disconnected from the financial reality that my income was the only thing keeping him housed and fed. "You contribute nothing to this family except money, which isn't what matters in real relationships between people who love each other." The accusation that I was good for nothing while eating in a house that I owned, during a meal that I had funded, surrounded by people whose survival depended on my income, was so disconnected from reality that it revealed the depth of Walter's psychological need to blame me for his own unemployment and financial dependence. "Walter is absolutely right," Lisa said with immediate support for her husband's attack on my character. "Samantha, you've become selfish and materialistic. You care more about making money than about being part of this family and contributing to our emotional well-being and relationship building." The agreement with Walter's assessment while ignoring my financial contributions that made their emotional well-being possible was both cruel and illogical, since their comfortable lifestyle and family stability were entirely dependent on the money they were characterizing as unimportant compared to their unemployed emotional availability. "All you care about is money. Ryan added with obvious enjoyment of the family attack on my character. "You're obsessed with work and commissions, and you don't understand what really matters in family relationships and human connections." The mockery of my income focus by someone who had never earned a paycheck while consuming the results of my money obsession was both personally infuriating and practically absurd, since his comfortable existence was entirely funded by the career dedication he was ridiculing. "You don't even belong at this table," Walter concluded with the most hurtful statement of the entire attack. "You're not really part of this family anymore because you've chosen money over people, and we'd be better off without someone who brings nothing but financial stress and work obsession to our family relationships." The statement that I didn't belong at the Thanksgiving table in my own house, while eating food I had purchased, surrounded by people whose housing I was providing, was the moment I realized that my family had become completely delusional about the financial reality of their situation and my role in their survival. But while my family continued their coordinated attack on my character and contributions, I was making the calm decision that would permanently alter their understanding of what good for nothing actually meant when applied to people who contributed nothing while criticizing those who provided everything. The decision to show my family exactly what nothing looked like came not through angry argument or defensive explanation, but through the kind of calm calculation that had made me successful in real estate negotiations, where emotional reactions would have destroyed deals and cost clients thousands of dollars in missed opportunities. "You're right," I said quietly as I reached into my purse and pulled out my house keys, placing them carefully on my dinner plate in front of the turkey and stuffing that I had purchased and prepared for people who had just finished telling me I was good for nothing and didn't belong at the table in my own home. The gesture of placing my keys on the plate was both symbolic and practical, representing my withdrawal from family relationships that had become toxic and abusive, while also beginning the process of removing their access to property and financial support that they had been taking for granted while attacking my character and contributions. "What are you doing?" Lisa asked with confusion about the meaning of my action and growing anxiety about the possibility that their verbal attack had created consequences they hadn't anticipated or prepared for during their coordinated assault on my priorities and lifestyle choices. "I'm giving you exactly what you've asked for," I replied with calm clarity about the logical connection between their demands and my response. "You've made it very clear that I'm good for nothing and don't belong here, so I'm removing myself and my nothing from your lives." The explanation that I was fulfilling their stated wishes rather than reacting emotionally to their attack was both accurate and strategic, since it framed my withdrawal as compliance with their demands rather than punishment for their cruelty and ingratitude. "Samantha, you're overreacting," Walter said with obvious panic as he began to understand that his daughter's response to being called good for nothing might involve actually removing the financial support that he had been dismissing as unimportant while depending on it for his survival. "I'm not overreacting," I replied with factual accuracy about my decision-making process. "You said I contribute nothing to this family, and you're right. Starting now, I'll contribute nothing to your housing, utilities, food, transportation, or any other expenses. You can experience what nothing actually provides." The systematic enumeration of financial support that would be withdrawn was both comprehensive and educational, ensuring that my family understood the scope of nothing they would be experiencing once they no longer had access to income they had been characterizing as unimportant compared to their unemployed emotional availability. "You can't just leave," Ryan said with desperation that revealed his sudden understanding that his comfortable lifestyle and continued unemployment depended entirely on the sister he had been mocking for her money obsession and work ethic. "I can leave, and I am leaving," I said while standing up from the table and gathering my coat and purse. "You'll discover how much nothing actually costs when you start paying for housing, utilities, food, and other expenses without the income from my little house showing job." The calm delivery of consequences while my family processed the reality that their verbal attack had eliminated their financial support was both satisfying and necessary, since they needed to experience the practical implications of rejecting the person whose income made their lifestyle possible. Have you ever walked away from people who depended entirely on you while they were still processing the magnitude of what they had just lost through their own cruelty And in gratitude, that's exactly what I was doing as I left my family sitting at the Thanksgiving table, beginning to understand that their attack on my character had cost them their housing, financial support, and comfortable lifestyle. "Where are you going?" Lisa called after me with panic that was finally appropriate to their situation, though it had come too late to prevent the consequences of their coordinated attack on the person whose financial sacrifice had made their family's stability possible. "I'm going to experience nothing," I replied without turning around to see their faces as they began to calculate the financial reality of life without the daughter they had just finished calling worthless and unwelcome at her own dinner table. The drive away from my house while my family remained inside, beginning to understand the magnitude of their mistake, was both emotionally liberating and practically necessary, since I needed time and space to implement the systematic withdrawal of support that would teach them the true value of someone they had dismissed as good for nothing. The hotel room where I spent Thanksgiving night was both a temporary refuge from family abuse and a strategic base for beginning the legal and financial processes that would remove my family's access to housing and support they had been taking for granted, while systematically attacking my character and contributions. The immediate implementation of consequences for my family's Thanksgiving attack began with phone calls to utility companies, mortgage servicers, and other financial institutions that would need to be notified about changes in payment authorization and account management for services that had been supporting 3 unemployed adults who had just learned they were about to experience life without those services. "I need to cancel automatic payments for utilities at my rental property," I told the electric company representative, using terminology that would protect me legally while ensuring that Walter, Lisa, and Ryan would soon discover what nothing meant in practical terms of heating, lighting, and basic household services. The systematic cancellation of utility payments, mortgage arrangements, and other financial support was both legally appropriate and practically educational, ensuring that my family would experience the full scope of what they had lost when they chose to attack the person who had been preventing their homelessness and financial ruin. I also need to begin eviction proceedings for tenants who are in violation of their lease agreement, I told my real estate attorney during an emergency consultation about removing family members who had forfeited their right to occupy my property through their Thanksgiving dinner attack on my character. The legal process of evicting family members from property they had been occupying rent-free was both emotionally difficult and practically necessary, since they had demonstrated that they viewed my financial support as something they were entitled to receive while treating me as someone who deserved criticism and rejection rather than gratitude and respect. "The eviction process will take approximately 60 days, my attorney explained, but you can immediately discontinue voluntary financial support for utilities, groceries, and other services that aren't required by law. The timeline for complete removal of my family from my property was longer than I would have preferred, but the immediate elimination of financial support would begin their education about the value of someone they had characterized as good for nothing, while depending on her income for their survival. By midnight on Thanksgiving night, I had successfully canceled or suspended all voluntary financial support for my family's lifestyle, changed my phone number to prevent their attempts at contact and manipulation, and begun the legal processes that would remove their access to housing they had been occupying while attacking the person who made that housing possible. The systematic withdrawal of support was both immediately effective and permanently educational, ensuring that Walter, Lisa, and Ryan would experience the practical implications of rejecting someone whose financial contributions they had been dismissing while benefiting from those contributions for years. The next morning brought evidence that my family was beginning to understand the magnitude of what they had lost through their Thanksgiving dinner attack, as my old phone number received 58 missed calls and multiple desperate voicemail messages that revealed their panic about losing financial support they had been taking for granted. "Samantha, please call us back," Lisa's first voicemail message said, with obvious anxiety about my failure to respond to their attempts at contact. "We need to talk about what happened at dinner, and we want to work this out as a family." The request to work this out, while characterizing their coordinated attack as something that had simply happened, rather than acknowledging it as deliberate cruelty, revealed their continued inability to take responsibility for their behavior and its natural consequences. "Samantha, this is getting ridiculous. Walter's voicemail message said with anger that was apparently directed at me for implementing consequences, rather than at himself for creating the situation through his attack on my character. You can't just disappear because your feelings got hurt during a family disagreement. The characterization of being called good for nothing and told I didn't belong in my own house as a family disagreement that had merely hurt my feelings demonstrated Walter's continued failure to understand the severity of his verbal attack and its appropriateness for permanent consequences. "Samantha, please come home," Ryan's message said with desperation that was finally appropriate to his situation as an unemployed college dropout who was about to lose his comfortable lifestyle and continued access to housing, food, and other necessities that had been provided by the sister he had been mocking. But the most revealing voicemail message was Walter's final attempt at contact, which consisted of a single word that summarized his growing understanding of what he had lost: please. The progression from angry justification to desperate pleading revealed Walter's rapid education about the financial reality of his situation. Once the daughter he had called worthless was no longer available to prevent his homelessness and provide financial support for his continued unemployment. Have you ever received desperate messages from people who had just finished telling you that you were worthless, once they realized that your worthless contributions were actually essential for their survival? That's exactly what I was experiencing as my family discovered the practical meaning of life, without someone they had dismissed as good for nothing. The utility company notifications that began arriving at my family's house by 7 a.m. the morning after Thanksgiving provided immediate education about the scope of financial support they were losing, as electricity, gas, water, and internet services were suspended due to discontinued payment authorization from the property owner. Your electric service will be discontinued in 72 hours due to non-payment, the utility company notice informed Walter, Lisa, and Ryan, who were suddenly learning that their comfortable lifestyle had been dependent on automatic payments from the daughter they had attacked for her money obsession. The rapid loss of basic household services was both immediately uncomfortable and educationally effective, ensuring that my family couldn't ignore the practical implications of losing financial support from someone whose income they had been characterizing as unimportant compared to their unemployed emotional availability. Your internet service has been suspended due to account closure, another notice informed them, eliminating their access to online entertainment, job search resources, and communication tools that had been funded by my monthly payments while they criticized my work schedule and career priorities. The systematic loss of services that most people take for granted was beginning to teach my family about the comprehensive nature of financial support they had been receiving while attacking the person who provided that support through working 7-day weeks and accepting demanding clients. "We're running out of food," Lisa reported to relatives during panicked phone calls, seeking assistance and advice about their deteriorating situation. "Samantha usually handles grocery shopping and meal planning, but she's disappeared and we don't have money for food." The revelation that I had been handling grocery shopping and meal planning while working full-time in real estate was news to extended family members who had been told that I was too focused on money to contribute to family needs and relationships. "The mortgage payment is due next week and we don't have access to Samantha's account," Walter explained to my uncle during desperate attempts to find alternative financial support. "If we can't make the payment, we'll face foreclosure proceedings." The panic about mortgage payments revealed that Walter had never fully understood that the house where they lived belonged to me rather than to them, and that his continued occupancy depended on maintaining positive relationships with the daughter he had been treating as a burden rather than recognizing her as his landlord and financial supporter. "Ryan's car payment is overdue and his insurance has been canceled," Lisa added during family crisis calls that were revealing the comprehensive nature of financial support I had been providing while enduring criticism about my priorities and lifestyle choices. The discovery that I had been covering Ryan's car payment and insurance while he remained unemployed and criticized my work ethic was both embarrassing for my family and educational for extended relatives who were learning the truth about our household financial dynamics. But while my family was panicking about immediate financial crises and loss of basic services, They were also discovering that extended family members were unwilling or unable to provide the level of financial support that I had been providing while being attacked for my selfishness and money obsession. "We can't afford to help with mortgage payments," Uncle Dave told Walter during one of many desperate requests for financial assistance. "We have our own household expenses and retirement planning to manage." Maybe Walter should look for employment instead of expecting family members to support his lifestyle, Aunt Margaret suggested during another request for assistance, revealing that extended family members had clearer understanding of personal responsibility than Walter had been demonstrating during his 2 years of unemployment. The rejection from extended family members who were unwilling to provide financial support was both practically devastating for Walter, Lisa, and Ryan, and educationally valuable as they learned that other people wouldn't fund their lifestyle while tolerating criticism of their work ethic and financial priorities. 2 weeks after my Thanksgiving departure, my family's situation had deteriorated to the point where eviction proceedings were beginning, utility services had been disconnected, and they were facing the prospect of homelessness that I had prevented through my financial sacrifice and property purchase 2 years earlier. "Samantha, we understand that we made mistakes," Lisa said during a voicemail message that acknowledged their behavior for the first time since Thanksgiving dinner. "We want to apologize and ask you to reconsider helping us through this difficult situation." The acknowledgement of mistakes, rather than taking responsibility for deliberate attacks on my character, was progress, but it was also insufficient to reverse consequences that had been designed to teach permanent lessons about gratitude and respect for people who provide financial support while receiving criticism and abuse in return. "We didn't realize how much you were contributing to our household expenses," Walter admitted during another desperate voicemail message. "We thought you were just paying some bills, not supporting our entire lifestyle and housing situation." The confession that he had been unaware of the scope of financial support I was providing while calling me good for nothing was both revealing about his detachment from financial reality and insulting about his failure to investigate or appreciate contributions he had been taking for granted for years. "Samantha, I'm sorry for what I said about your work and priorities," Ryan said during his own apology attempt. "I didn't understand that my lifestyle and continued unemployment were only possible because of your income and financial sacrifice." The apology that acknowledged his dependence on my income while characterizing it as enabling his unemployment was both accurate and insufficient to restore relationships that had been permanently damaged by years of criticism and the Thanksgiving dinner attack that had revealed their true attitudes about my value and contributions. But while my family was learning painful lessons about financial reality and personal responsibility, I was also discovering the emotional freedom and personal satisfaction that came from removing myself from relationships that had been abusive and exploitative despite my generous financial support and professional success. The new apartment that I rented with money that was no longer being used to support ungrateful family members was both immediately comfortable and symbolically meaningful, representing my independence from people who had been treating my financial support as an entitlement while criticizing my character and lifestyle choices. "This is exactly what I've been wanting," I told myself as I furnished my apartment with purchases that reflected my personal taste, rather than family needs and preferences that had been prioritized over my own comfort and living arrangements for years. The freedom to make financial decisions based on my own preferences, rather than supporting unemployed family members who criticized my priorities, was both liberating and validating, confirming that my decision to withdraw from toxic relationships had been appropriate and overdue. "Samantha, your family has been calling us about reaching you," my real estate colleague mentioned during a professional meeting. "They seem desperate to reestablish contact and are asking mutual acquaintances to intervene on their behalf." The attempts to reach me through professional contacts revealed the extent of my family's panic about losing access to financial support, but they also provided opportunities to establish clear boundaries about my unavailability for continued abuse and exploitation disguised as family relationships. "Please tell them that nothing is busy," I replied with reference to Walter's assessment of my contributions. "If I'm good for nothing, then nothing doesn't have time for people who don't appreciate its value." The response that I was too busy to maintain relationships with people who had rejected my value was both factually accurate and appropriately dismissive, ensuring that my family understood their permanent loss of access to someone they had treated as worthless while depending on her for their survival. 6 months after my Thanksgiving departure, my family had lost their housing, been forced to move in with reluctant relatives who couldn't afford to support their lifestyle indefinitely, and were finally confronting the reality that Walter needed to find employment rather than maintaining his selective approach to job searching. Walter finally got a job at a warehouse. I heard through mutual acquaintances who occasionally provided updates about my family's situation. It pays minimum wage, and Lisa is working part-time at a retail store. Ryan moved back in with his girlfriend's family. The forced employment and housing changes that had resulted from losing my financial support were both appropriate consequences for their Thanksgiving attack and natural outcomes of removing enablement that had allowed them to avoid personal responsibility for years. They've been asking people if you might be willing to reconcile, the same acquaintance mentioned during another conversation. They seem to understand now that they made serious mistakes in how they treated you. The interest in reconciliation after experiencing life without my financial support was predictable, but insufficient, since their motivation was clearly based on wanting to restore access to resources rather than genuine remorse for years of criticism and the devastating Thanksgiving dinner attack on my character. Nothing is still busy. I replied with consistency about my unavailability for relationships with people who had demonstrated their capacity for cruelty and ingratitude when they felt secure in their dependence on my generosity. 1 year after leaving my family at the Thanksgiving table where they had told me I was good for nothing, I had built a successful life surrounded by colleagues, clients, and friends who appreciated my professional achievements and personal character without expecting me to fund their lifestyle while tolerating criticism and abuse. Samantha, you've seemed so much happier and more confident since you moved into your own place, my real estate partner observed during one of our business planning meetings. Whatever changes you made in your personal life have clearly been positive for your professional performance and overall well-being. The observation that I was happier without family relationships that had been draining and abusive was both accurate and validating, confirming that my decision to prioritize my own well-being over maintaining toxic relationships had been appropriate and beneficial for my mental health and career development. I learned that some people will always resent your success instead of appreciating your contributions, I explained, during conversations with friends who had supported my decision to withdraw from family relationships that had become harmful and exploitative. It's better to build relationships with people who celebrate your achievements rather than people who criticize you while depending on your support. The wisdom that I had gained about relationship management and personal boundaries was both professionally valuable and personally protective, ensuring that future relationships would be based on mutual respect and appreciation rather than financial dependence combined with resentment and criticism. Your family's loss is our gain, my client said during a successful house closing that had required extensive negotiation and problem-solving skills that were enhanced by confidence and emotional stability that came from removing toxic relationships from my life. You're the most dedicated and effective real estate agent we've ever worked with. The professional recognition from clients who valued my expertise and dedication was both personally satisfying and financially rewarding, demonstrating that investing in my career rather than subsidizing ungrateful family members had been the right choice for my long-term success and happiness. 2 years after my Thanksgiving departure, I received news that Walter, Lisa, and Ryan had finally achieved some stability in their new living situations and employment arrangements, but were still hoping for reconciliation that would restore access to my financial resources and family relationships. Your family sent a Christmas card, my former neighbor mentioned during a chance encounter at the grocery store. They included a long letter about missing you and wanting to rebuild family relationships. The Christmas outreach after 2 years of no contact was both predictable and inappropriate, since it represented another attempt to restore access to financial support rather than addressing the fundamental character issues that had led to years of criticism followed by the devastating Thanksgiving attack. I hope they've learned valuable lessons about employment, personal responsibility, and treating people with respect, I replied, with diplomatic response that avoided reopening communication while acknowledging their right to learn and grow from consequences they had created through their own behavior. The letter mentioned that they understand now how much you were contributing to their lives. The neighbor continued with information about my family's belated recognition of financial support they had been dismissing while attacking my character and priorities. Understanding and appreciating are different things, I said with accuracy about the distinction between intellectual recognition of financial support and genuine gratitude that would have prevented years of criticism and the Thanksgiving dinner attack that had permanently damaged our relationships. The recognition that my family might finally understand my contributions was both satisfying and insufficient, since understanding without changed behavior was merely intellectual acknowledgement, rather than the emotional transformation that would have been necessary for relationship repair. Have you ever realized that people who needed to lose your support in order to appreciate it probably never deserved that support in the first place? That's exactly what I understood as I reflected on 2 years of peace, professional success, and personal happiness that had followed my decision to remove myself from relationships that had been abusive despite my generosity. 3 years after the Thanksgiving dinner, where my family had told me I was good for nothing, I was thriving both professionally and personally, while they continued to struggle with the natural consequences of losing someone whose financial support they had taken for granted, while attacking her character and contributions. Samantha Kelly was recognized as Realtor of the Year for exceptional client service and community involvement, the local Business Journal announced in their annual awards coverage. Her dedication to helping families find their perfect homes has made her one of the most respected professionals in our real estate community. The professional recognition that acknowledged my expertise and community contributions was both personally meaningful and publicly validating, demonstrating that investing in my career and removing toxic family relationships had allowed me to achieve success and recognition that wouldn't have been possible while supporting ungrateful people who criticized my work ethic and priorities. I've learned that some of the best gifts come from people saying no to supporting your mistakes, I said during my acceptance speech at the awards ceremony. When people who depend on you call you worthless, the most valuable thing you can do is show them what life looks like without your worth. The speech that referenced my family experience without revealing personal details resonated with other business professionals who had dealt with similar challenges in balancing professional success with family expectations and financial demands that weren't matched by appreciation or respect. Your story about removing toxic relationships to focus on your career has inspired many of us, a colleague mentioned after the awards ceremony. It takes courage to prioritize your own success over people who don't appreciate your contributions. The recognition that my decision had been courageous rather than cruel was both validating and educational, confirming that protecting yourself from people who abuse your generosity while criticizing your character is appropriate self-care rather than family abandonment. Meanwhile, through mutual acquaintances, I learned that my family had finally achieved basic financial stability through employment and reduced living expenses, but were still dealing with the long-term consequences of losing the financial support that had previously allowed them to maintain comfortable lifestyles without working or contributing. Walter is still working at the warehouse, and Lisa has been promoted to manager at her retail job. I heard through occasional updates from people who maintained contact with both me and my family. Ryan finally got his GED and is taking community college classes while working part-time. The employment and educational progress that had resulted from losing my financial support was both appropriate and overdue, demonstrating that my withdrawal had created the necessity for personal responsibility that had been missing while they were able to depend on my income and generosity. They've told people that they realize now that you were the reason they were able to live comfortably for years, another mutual acquaintance mentioned. They seem to understand that calling you worthless while living off your support was both wrong and incredibly unfair. The acknowledgement that their Thanksgiving attack had been inappropriate was progress, but it was also information that came 3 years too late to restore relationships that had been permanently damaged by their willingness to abuse someone who had been preventing their homelessness and financial ruin. If you're reading this and you're supporting family members who criticize your work ethic while depending on your income, or who call you selfish while living off your generosity, please know that you have the right to withdraw that support and let them experience life without the contributions they've been dismissing as worthless. Sometimes the most educational gift you can give ungrateful people is the experience of life without your help, and sometimes protecting your own well-being requires removing yourself from relationships that drain your resources while attacking your character and achievements. If this story resonated with your own experiences, please hit that subscribe button and share your experiences in the comments below. Have you ever had to choose between supporting ungrateful family members and protecting your own success and happiness? How did you handle people who depended on your generosity while criticizing your priorities? Your story might help someone else who's struggling with similar family dynamics and financial exploitation. Thank you for joining me on this journey from family abuse through systematic withdrawal to professional success and personal happiness. Remember that your contributions have real value, and people who call you nothing while depending on everything you provide need to learn that lesson through experiencing life without your support. See you in our next story here at Her Sweet Revenge.